Hi, this is Kerri Hummingbird, and this is Soul Nectar, that show that talks about the unknowable, the vastness beyond our physical bodies. And we like to call that essence, source, all that is, that which is bigger than us. There's so many names. And I like to interview people to have them share their stories with us because we learn by storytelling as human beings. And today I'm so excited to have Elizabeth Locey here with us. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone. Thank you so much, Kerri, for inviting me to join your crowd here.
Absolutely. This is going to be a fun show, people. So Elizabeth is a way shower, an oracle, and a crystal priestess. She helps women and select men from around the world to overcome the obstacles they've placed in their path and embody their mythic greatness. A prominent entrepreneur recently said of Elizabeth, "As an oracle, she shines when guiding people through their darkest fears into love." Indeed, the very first answer she received from her own Akashic records in 2008 was, "You are a truth teller with capital T's, and when you sing your truth song, imprisoned angels are set free." I love that. And something you should know about Elizabeth is that she actually had a distinguished 13-year academic career as an award-winning professor of French and women's studies, well-known scholar and leader. And after all that, she made a sharp right turn. And she quit her guaranteed salary for life job and went from being a socially sanctioned wise woman as an academic and scholar to picking up her staff as a spiritual teacher, channel, and healer, and has never looked back. And so that's how you know that today's conversation is going to be amazing. So strap on your seatbelts, people. Here we go for a ride into the fantastical world of the mystical. So I'm so excited to have you on. This is so great to have these conversations. And so, one of the first questions I have for people is, how did you know, how did you touch your essence? How did you touch that bigger you inside of this physical body? How did you first become aware that you weren't just this being walking around in flesh and bones?
I think I was very connected to that when I was little, like very Piscean child. I knew at the age of 4, I had this flash. I was outside holding on to a flowering forsythia branch, looking up in the sky. I was one of those space cadets, right? Always looking at the sky because that was the most interesting place, right? And all of a sudden I had this flash. Today I would call it a hit, but I had this flash. I'm like, this is the dream and out there is the reality. And I also knew that I probably couldn't tell the adults around me because they might not understand. So I just kept that to myself. But then, when I was about 8, I realized that I could get approval from my PhD holding parents by excelling academically. I could do just fine, not even listening, but just watching the clouds moving in the sky, right, in class. But when I was 8, I'm like, oh, they'll pay attention to me if I'm doing really well in school. So, or they might say that, they're proud of me or whatever. They never did. But that was the way that I could think that I might get approval from them. And so, it was straight A's all the way, Dean's List, master's with honors, PhD, right? And then I was a professor too. And shortly after I became a professor, and of course, during the PhD, that's like the skeptics boot camp for 7 years, right? So you get all of this belief system drummed out of you. But I was doing my master's and PhD in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a seriously spiritual place. I lived on the isthmus, literally at the foot of an Indian mound, right, for 7 years. And
Wow.
I didn't know it until I was about to leave, that's where I was. But I would always go up to the top of the mound and look out over Lake Mendota, and especially on full moon nights, and listen to the drum circles coming across the water. And I loved it. I also, I played in that zone, right? And I just absorbed books on graphology and palmistry and all these other kind of woo-woo things, but that was just like, that was for fun. That's not serious. Like, I am over here like focusing on my like smarts and getting my book written and all that. And it's so funny because like a couple years after I became a professor, I'm like, oh, there is no separation. I've been trying to make these two parts of my life different. And actually the fun piece really is the piece that I need to bring in because it is my essence. And I had a really interesting experience. My therapist, because, you know, I think it's always important to have a therapist. And I hired her because I was trying to teach a million classes and learn how to do the advising system and have some friends. So I had a boyfriend, and we got really serious really fast, and then it kind of all exploded. I'm like, okay, I don't have time to be heartbroken. I have a ton of work to do. I better hire a therapist. And a year later, she was like, Elizabeth, actually it's 2 years later. So I loved her by this time. And she's like, Elizabeth, I have something to tell you. It's become a really important part of my life, and I'm not sure how you'll respond, so I'll just say it. I've started channeling an entity named Michael, and he wants to say hi. And my natural response would have been to snort and roll my eyes. But I'm like, okay, I love her. I'm not going to snort, but I am going to leave because we are done. And so I started to get up out of her sofa, and this atomic bomb of love went off in the room because that hello from Michael was already in place. And it blew me back into the couch and like pinned me to the back. And my eyes were like saucers. And so this, you know, I needed proof that the spiritual world was real. And boy, did I get it big time that day.
Oh, yeah.
Channeling is some bullshit created to manipulate woolly-minded people to, oh my God, this shit's for real, like in a second. And I'm like, okay. So now I'm convinced, and I just really rolled from there. That was early 2001. And I didn't realize that 6 months later, I would be channeling my own entity. That wasn't in the plan. But and so, but I was still like getting tenure and becoming chair of my department. And finally in 2010, I'd been chair for almost 6 years. And I had recently stepped down from being chair. And my husband was like, so why are you so upset? And it was actually the 1st of January, 2010. There had been a blue moon lunar eclipse the night before. And I had spent hours and hours journaling about what I wanted to release from my life, what I wanted to call in. And he said, like, you're really mad. Like, what's making you so upset? And I went in and I'm like, I think I just don't want to go back to work. and he's like, why don't you quit? And, my parents were professors. All my friends were professors. Everyone in my entire life from before I was born, they were all professors. So the quitting a tenured position was an unthinkable thought. It's like giving back the Powerball. Like, oh, I don't need this, thanks. I thought I did, but hey, it's cool.
Wow.
And so it was so funny, like watching, I could see the vibration of his words come towards me as he was speaking them. And when they hit my body, it just rang like a gong. And I'm like, I can quit and I will. And I turned around to resign. And he's like, wait. Do you need to quit today and never ever walk back in there? Or can you finish out your contract until May? I'm like, oh, I can do the contract. Like, I just don't want to be locked into this prison for the rest of my life.
Right.
And so it was, it was so powerful. It wasn't easy to become a professor. Like, there was a lot of really nasty stuff that had to happen to get the PhD. It feels like there's a lot of like screwing in the thumb screws that feels like it needs to happen when you get a PhD. Like, maybe the former professors feel like you have to jump through like the enormous
a million hoops,
dripping hoops, right? And so it wasn't easy, but it was a pretty clear path. It was a path I was never going to take. Like, I'll anything but French professor, right? I'll do that. And then of course I was a French professor, but so all of a sudden I was like, wow, all right, so I'm not going to be a professor anymore. What's that going to be? And I had been working in my Akashic records. At first, you cited the first answer I ever got in my records that were channeled for me. And so that was almost 2 years before the moment I quit. And And so I was like, well, I have no idea what I'm going to do. But I know that I'm called to do something other than this. And so when I got in my records, the next time, which was just a couple of weeks later, I was asking about all sorts of things like crystals and even massage therapy. And the keepers kept saying, that's fine, but it's really not the brilliant yes. And I was like, just sort of talking to myself. I'm like, well, I wish it could be Akashic Records. It is Akashic Records. It was like confetti and balloons falling from the ceiling. But I was upset because 15 months before I had asked specifically if channeling records was for me. And I was like, please say yes, please say yes, please say yes, please say yes. And their answer was, Elizabeth, you've got bigger fish to fry. The rug is about to be pulled out from under you and you need to pay attention. And it's true. That was when I stepped down from being chair and my department folded. It was just really like, wow. It was a super, super tough year 8 years ago. And so they were right. I did need to pay attention, and I probably couldn't really latch on to Akashic Records as something to do in my life before I had really completed with academia in a serious way. And so I did. I completed with academia. I'm like, Kali Swaha, like, go get rid of that. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, oh yeah, it is Akashic Records. So
exciting.
Yeah. So I started channeling, and it was really powerful. It was always powerful. My mentor is Jen Aramuth of Akashic Transformations, and she is amazing. She's also too busy to take many people these days, but and it's been like, I don't know, 15 months since I was able to work with her even. And because she's got little kids and stuff, she wants to spend time. But I was so thrilled to be out on my own and just doing fun things and exploring the ethers. And my scholar's mind, this really curious scholar's mind of mine, was like so interested to be like going through these archival materials, like, oh, this is so interesting to find out about this and find out about this over here. And I still love that.
So talk a little bit about that internal process that you went through when you left your prescribed path, the one that everybody thinks is what you're supposed to do. We live in a society that values certain things and not other things. And, what's kind of some of the internal, did you just have a really strong knowing in that moment? Like, yes, I need to leave? Or did you kind of have some process that you went through as you were stepping out into your new path?
As soon as the words hit my body, I knew they were right. I'm like, oh yes, I've been waiting years to hear this probably, but this is the exact right moment. And then there was never any looking back. People kept asking me like, well, aren't you going to miss teaching? And I say, I do at least as much teaching now as I did then. I just don't have paperwork. Right. And I don't have to like do assessment tests all the time and, or, go to faculty meetings. And, I have meetings with my team, my intuitive team all the time. They're nicer than the faculty meetings were. And, so yeah, and people ask me like, how did you make that decision? How did you, did you ever look back and like, oh, you have such cojones? And I'm like, I don't really, I just knew that it was the right thing. And I switched from one track into another. It like popped in, and I'm running on those rails now. And I don't know. I mean, I don't really necessarily feel particularly brave about it. It just was the only thing I could do. It was so clearly the only thing I could do.
I wanted to ask you about another question, but I wanted to say first, because this has been on my mind, I had to speak it, is when you were talking about how Archangel Michael came in and he was giving you that message. I had one of those messages, but I didn't know who it was at the time, because I didn't have any spiritual inklings at all at this time, and I wasn't raised with any religions or anything like that. So I didn't know anything. But when I moved out to Texas from California in 2005, I was, my goal was to get fit and lose all the weight that I had gained having children. And and then I wanted to explore these past life things, because I'd always been very fascinated by it. And my stepdad had done some past life readings and had like, they even recorded it. Like his voice changed, like whenever he went in between lives, and like, then he would change, like his voice would change in the recording, like for the next life. And like, he would become that person. It was so cool. And I was really curious about it. So I wanted to do work on that. And I went and found this person, and I was like, gonna make, I was like, I'm going to find out who I was, I'm going to know. And I get in there and there's like blackness, no message. And I'm like, okay, this hypnotist obviously sucks. And so I am going to find the best hypnotist there is. And I started obsessing about it. Like, I'm going to find the best one. And I was like at the gym, like cycling on my little bike, and I'm like obsessing on it. Like, I know there's probably got to be somebody on Oprah or like somebody else. Like, I'm going to find this person. And all of a sudden this voice, like, and I never had this happen before, but like this male voice, this big voice came in my head, and it said, "You have a life, live it." And I was like, oh, who's watching me? I was like, what was that? And I was like, okay. And right after that is when my life completely fell apart.
Right.
Like, the whole thing, I destroyed it all, burned the forest down. Yeah.
I've done that too.
So fun. So one of the things that we talked about when we initially talked, which I found so interesting because I really resonates as truth inside of me, is we were talking about how there's many of us showing up on the planet now that are like, some kind of huge legendary thing, right? Like, I'm some kind of dragon slayer or something, like you could probably look at me and
dragon slayer or dragon rider. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe dragon rider.
With the dragon or against the dragon? My theory is that patriarchy has set mythical creatures up as the enemy.
And they're not.
They're not.
Actually, like the last healing I had was with the head, what is that called? Cranial sacral. Mm-hmm. And there into the middle of our session, she's like, oh my gosh, there's like a huge Viking in the room. And he says that they're like, you're like the dragon riders or something something like that. Like, and he's really proud of you, and you're like part of his team, and he's looking after you. He's like standing there the whole way through the thing. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. But I have no awareness of that really. Exactly. But yeah, so
do a legendary self session with me.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you about that actually. So, here's the cool thing is that, since I got on this path of healing, I started having all these really big memories, like a few years ago, I remembered, and I've been working on healing this for the last couple of years, like 3 years. I remembered that I used to be like this shaman leader kind of person, Cherokee on the Trail of Tears. And, I actually I've been grieving like for the last 3 years, like grieving, like aching grief for all of my people that died and like processing it. And now I'm starting to have other kind of memories, like, being on a witch on a, burn at the stake. And then I just had one last week since we talked. I had another one where I was in Salem witch trials and they had me in the stock thing and they like, I like having all these memories, like of other times. And so I do feel like my energy body is huge. At school, we took ourselves out of our bodies, like out of our physical bodies. They actually there's a practice where you lift the energy body out of the body, and everybody in my team had to back up a foot. Cause when I came out of this little body, it was like, it's this huge energy. So talk a little bit. So I think there's some truth to this whole, there's a bunch of us that are legendary and bigger than life. And we came in and
Exactly. So this research I've been doing around the legendary self and being mythic in the records, it showed me pretty clearly that, in fact, a lot of people who identify on the indigo spectrum, for example, or identify as empaths or know they're light workers, actually came in as these mythic heroes. And I'll say heroes, even though I consider probably 70+% of the current incarnated ones who are doing this work to be women. right? So I'll say heroes, but I definitely do not want to be suggesting by that. It's just easier to say heroes. And heroine sounds somehow, because of the patriarchal world that we live in, it sounds somehow a little more feeble somehow, like. And so legendary heroes, we came in with the express purpose to come in and shift the energy of the world, right? And so we got here, we're like, yes, we've got our big sword or bow and arrow or light shield or hammer or whatever it was, and our light armor and everything, and we're like, yes, we're here to save the world. And no one noticed, and they're like, okay. So we're like, all right, so maybe a ticker tape parade wasn't necessary, but a small welcoming party would have been nice.
And in some cases, it did the opposite. They're like, there's something wrong with you. You need to get on pharmaceuticals.
Well, that came later. Like if the child in question did not kind of fall into line on their own, then it was the pharmaceutical path. Like, oh, you're different, right? And one of the descriptions of the indigo child is that they are the black sheep of the family. I have a being mythic client who says, I am not the black sheep of my family. I am the iridescent glitter sheep of my family. And I love that.
I don't know. I don't know what I am. I'm the rainbow hummingbird of my family.
Yes.
All really, my family is like, your name's not Hummingbird. And I'm like, it is.
It is.
It is. Trust me.
Right. And so in order, in an attempt, often vain attempt, to get approval from the adults around us, we did things like, not allow our wings to grow or clip them if they were starting to grow. And that was a source of judgment from the people around us. And, our Siddhic gifts, like for me, it's channeling, right? That was really repressed. Like, no, you can't be a truth teller because you're only 4, right? You don't know anything. I'm like, I think I do actually. But that wasn't allowed. And because only school was the path to knowledge, right? And so a lot of people have lots of gifts, like the energy healing gifts or, whatever gifts they have. They were really forced to kind of put those gifts away and pretend they never ever had them, right? And their light armor had to get hidden. And ultimately they bound and gagged their mythic selves so much that, they were mummified, right? And put in these golden sarcophagi and hidden so well that we didn't even remember that they existed, right? Until recently. And it's kind of like these little pops and like shimmers in our dreams maybe, or in our meditation space, right? We're like, oh, I feel like there's something more. Like, I'm really attracted to big swords. Like, what's that about? Or like, I think I might have wings. And
I've seen my wings. They started showing up to me. Like, I saw it in the bathtub one time, like a few years ago, and I'm in the bath and I'm like, I have wings. Like, I can almost, it's like I can feel it too. Like right in the center of my back, behind my heart is where it's often tight. Yeah. And it like never gets loose there. Like it's always like it's carrying something.
Right. It's like the bud of the wings that it isn't quite allowed to like spring forth. So yeah, when I started going deeper into looking at mythic selves and these legendary heroes, I'm like, oh my gosh, this explains everything, right? Everything in my life, everything in the hundreds of clients I've worked with as a channel in the past. This explains, why we had to have Donald Trump as a president to make everyone say, okay, you know what? I could deal with it before, but this is just too much. I can't.
Too far. It's gone too far.
Yeah, but so he's patriarchy's poster boy, and so more and more people are really seeing the truth of like the old structures and how rotten they are, and it'll make it easier for everyone when there's more buy-in to the destruction. And also, like for a couple of years, even before Trump, I was talking about like tearing down the patriarchy, right? And really going after it. And now that I've started this mythic work, I see that it's not about tearing down the patriarchy. It's about women and men standing up in their full mythic height, right, with their wings and their tools, and like just really, and as you stand up, you kind of these structures of patriarchy, because it's all hierarchical, right? It's a top-down hierarchy. Hierarchy doesn't even exist outside of patriarchy, if you can even imagine. Like a lot of people say, you know, like there are certain hierarchies of angels out there, or the divine whatever. And I'm like, no. Hierarchy is entirely patriarchal. Like the principle of the circle is what is divine, right? It's like everything is equal and beautiful in its own way. Nothing is inherently better than anything else, right? Or above it or below it, right? It's all just not separate, but just one.
Well, and it's hard for people to grasp that, because I think we're so used to this structure. We've been domesticated in this structure.
We can't see outside of it. It's
point
like
A to point B to get result C.
Yeah.
And that the way to success is, you know, good grades that lead to a good paying job that leads to this and that. And if you do anything outside of that box, which a lot of people are being called to do now, including me, there's no clear path, because things are unfolding and it's all based in surprises and synchronicity.
Following your intuition. Yeah. I mean,
and your intuition and working with your guides, and like it's a big mystery and it's a game and it's fun and it's like hide and seek, and you don't know when the thing is going to find, you know, the little egg is going to turn up, you know. It's fun.
It's such a fun game. And that, like, the more you can tap into the energy of play around this and adventure, the better it is. So I'm just really loving the whole adventure, like just as it's unfolding more and more. It's brilliant, and I can't wait to see what happens. I know it's going to be really hard, like in the out picturing, it's going to be hard, like as structures that even if we don't appreciate them, we use them, right? Like the financial system or governmental systems, right? Even if we are like actively saying like, okay, that's got to go because it's a rotten and moribund structure, still it's what everybody uses. And so like in the gap between like what we have now and what will be created, there's going to be some pain.
There's some bumps. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, talk a little bit about, you know, because I know you and I have talked about how, well, you know, when before other lifetimes when we've come in and we've been healers and we've been Wiccan and we've been, you know, the results have not been very good. And it's right. It's resulted poorly.
Patriarchal age, right?
For us.
And it's old. And this is the, you know, some people, when they come across my stuff, I love devil's advocates, right? Because it helps me to kind of like hone what I say and how I look at things. And so the devil's advocates are like, well, why haven't there been legendary heroes around recently? And I'm like, well, because it's the turning of the age, and that it only turns every 2,600 years or so. So it's like right on time.
Right on time. Here we are.
Yeah.
Hi. We came. You called.
Exactly. And so, you know, when we got here, we're like, we're here to save the world for you. And everyone's like, did you say something? I'm sorry. She must have.
They're so shut down. You know, that's the thing. It's like spiritual. Okay. So there's all this religion, but no spirituality. And, you know, when I say that, I mean, you know, to me, it's a experience from your whole being. It's not reading a book.
Yeah, to me, it's the Gnostic experience that's most important. That's like experiencing and learning it yourself from the experience. And
being your own guide on your own journey.
Exactly.
It's like specially crafted just for you. It doesn't matter like how anybody else connects in or understands or is led along their path. It's like that can be a guidepost for you, but really it's your journey.
Exactly. And people often get surprised that I have never read and will never read a book on the Akashic Records. And that's true because, you know, I've trained many Akashic Record channels, and I'm friends with lots, you know, and when we get together and talk, the way the records show up for each of us is different. So there is no right way to see the records, right? They're whatever. And sometimes when I'm working with different people, it'll show up differently. I've only had a real library come up twice. And, you know, okay, that's not how it is for me. Excellent. And it doesn't make it any worse, right? I'm a hotshot. I really am good at what I do. And people are amazed when they work with me. And, you know, I don't sit in a library. We go off on adventures and discover whatever needs to be discovered. And so, yeah, I'm not interested in reading about the Akashic Records because I know that they show up in exactly the right way for each individual. And I've also had a number of near-death experiences, none of which were similar. And, well, two of which were kind of similar because they were close together in time. But the experience of them was different. And then other people who've had near-death experiences too, they're always different. And someone asked about that one time, and the answer was, it's like a near-death experience is like looking through a black sheet of paper with a pinprick in it, and everyone has a different pinprick, and so you can only see like the smallest bit. You can't see like the whole kaleidoscope of everything about the past life experience. And that's why it's different. And I think it's the same way with the records. Like we just each take our own intuitive filter in when we do the work or receive the work. And it's different for everybody. And I love that because otherwise I'd be bored, right? I'd have to go, you know, become a biologist or something.
Yeah, one of the things that's been really cool for me is as you kind of step in, I think as you make the decision to step forward in your own experience of spirituality, that's all it really takes is that decision that you're open, that you're willing to receive, that you're willing to experience, and then some actions towards that. Then, you're going to be assisted in opening that channel for yourself. And then the answer is to trust what you receive. And that's the hardest part for a lot of people, is trusting their intuition. But when you do that, things really start to open up, and they open up more and more and more and more. And now it's so cool is that it's kind of a fun thing, but if I open it, like if I look at somebody in their eyes long enough, like I'll start to see who they've been, like, especially if I've known them in other lives, I'll be able to see, like, and I'll get a glimpse of it. Like you and I talked on the phone and I was like, oh yeah, I'm picking up on some, like I'll start to get that little radar, like, oh yeah, we've definitely been together before. So talk a little bit
at the last turning of the age.
Yes.
Maybe several times in between, but like, I think there is a group of us that does that, comes in to kind of shift the balance, right?
With our big old energy.
It's true.
It is true. And I thought, okay, now here's another thing, because I was going to go into the intuition thing, but now I'm changing directions because we're having a feminine driven conversation, which is, one of the things that I think has happened, I know it's happened for me, and I suspect it's happened for many others, is that you come in with this big bright light and your big old energy and seeing things in a completely different way than everybody around you. And you're met with a lot of resistance, like a lot of rejection, a lot of like, no, like,
yeah.
People just,
so here's,
I don't know, they're having a hard time receiving it sometimes.
My take on that. And if you have ever experienced someone shining a bright light right in your face, what's your response to that? Exactly. And that if you shine a bright light on something, their shadow is really big and powerful on that thing. And so I'm jumping the gun a little bit to say, we'll talk about it later, but the free gift that I sent to you, the link, it has a recording on there of like how to put layers of energy on chakra by chakra, all the way up through soul star. And there are 2 final layers that are gold and pink that are beautiful filters. It doesn't diminish your light at all, but it helps you to not have that response when your big light is shining on people who can't quite handle the light yet.
And another thing I realized, thank you for that, because that's so true. I've actually had people tell me when I was earlier in my journey and I was sort of taking the layers off, like taking off the layers of domestication, the roles, the things that were not really
All
true.
the different veils that were keeping your light kind of subdued.
Yeah, just like taking that off, releasing my 20-year relationship that was totally based on wounding, whatever karma I had left to deal with. I don't know. I was dealing with it. And as I was working, I was like bringing in my light. Like people would be like, it's like almost like people that could see were like, it's too bright, Kerri. Like, it's tone it down. And they're like, what are you visualizing? I'm like, a big bright light. And they're like, no, oh, please don't do that. So I started realizing, I'm like, okay, I got to tone that down. And then recently I learned that, it's also how you hold your energy. So it's how you're holding your energy. I was holding it sort of like unconsciously. I'm a big energy body, and I wasn't being mindful of being around people in a way that respected their space.
Mm-hmm.
So my energy is like all over everybody's energy. I can feel everything. And some people don't want to be felt. Like some people don't want you to be in their space.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to learn how, when I'm in a group of energetically more sensitive people that can even talk about it with any kind of awareness, is I kind of like, I hug myself.
That's a good one.
I just hug I coil like a little spiral and hug myself. And that feels good to other people. It feels like a hug and they like it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're more warm and receptive to me than being kind of like, you're too big.
Right. Don't invade me.
I've heard you're too big like my whole life. Is that another one? I mean, maybe that's just unique to me, but I've heard you're too big.
I have, but I rejected it a lot. But there was the pendulum swing for me into too small. And with certain people, if I don't want them to blow up, I get really small.
Yeah, I did that too.
Like bug size small. And then I realize, like, when I leave their space, it takes me a long time to come back to my full size, right? And my full power, because I've like magicked myself down to like the size of a pea. And early on in my business, I would do that. Like I would go visit family, and in order not to blow up the house, I would like get, and then it wouldn't be until like my next quarterly mastermind that people would say, like, why are you so small? Like, where are you? I don't even see you there. Like, where are you? I'm like, oh.
I guess I'll grow again.
It's like one of those little sponge animals that you drop in the bathtub and
Here I am. So, well, that's super fun. And so let's talk about, how do you help people find their intuition? Let's go back to that topic, because I think that's, since it's so nebulous, every single person, I mean, it's not nebulous, but there's not one size fits all, in that sense. How do you help guide people to finding their unique way of processing the Akashic records and the information? I mean, that's their intuition. That's how they receive information.
Well, I used to teach classes. I had a class called Rock Your Intuition. And then I realized January of 2016 was the last time I taught it. And I realized that my energy had kind of moved off of that, like, shoot from the hip, kind of like, hey, rock your intuition kind of thing, to being one of more like presence, right? Because being a priestess was really getting bigger and bigger in my life. And so I was thinking that I would offer a program called Mirror Your Intuition, but then this whole Being Mythic and Legendary Self kind of stepped in front. And Being Mythic is now where I really hone people's intuitions. Like, this is ultimately the goal of Being Mythic, is not needing me anymore, right? And it's a 3-month deep dive, very intense, not inexpensive, I'll say that, where we basically start with what I used to sell separately as a VIP, where we're in their records, answering some questions, and then we go down to their sacred garden. And this is a garden that they can come to at any time to replenish their energies. It's a garden, and you have one too, right, that you have built over your hundreds or thousands of lifetimes, right? And so everything in that garden is there to feed you. And so we spend some time just exploring the garden and looking around and like, are there paths, or is it all grass? Is it mountains? Are there streams and lakes and fountains? Are there, is it more wild stuff, or, highly pruned things like Italian gardens? Or, what is it like? Some people have structures in their gardens, other people do not. And while we're there, we talk to their higher self. And I have the ability, I have a healing channel in the palms of my hand, so I have a couple hundred of double terminated Tibetan quartzes over in my collection, and they're already powerhouses. But when I take this download from the higher self that includes everything you need to be mythic and load it in there and then mail it to you, like, people's lives are never the same. Like, they start doing magic, right? Really, things that are considered outside the realm of possible, and including bending time. That's the one that's listed most often, but just skipping over, not going from A to B to C, right? But from A to F in a single step, right? And it's beautiful to watch, and that's where we start. And then we just have lots of time, and it's a combination of their visualization, of Akashic Records channeling. I do emotional transmutation when we're in their records and we get to the source of this piece that is holding them back. Some people call it self-sabotage, other people call it obstacles, right? Whatever it is you want to call it, there is got to be something keeping you from going to where you want to go if you're not there, right? So we're at the source, we address the emotion, that, because it's always an emotion that is at the root of it, right? There's an experience, and so we address the experience in the records, and then we do this emotional transmutation, and the results are magical. People just like shed huge layers of stuff in 10 minutes. And so it's really deep, it's really intense. And we also do a lot of play, because the divine child in each of us was the one who was so wounded and had to be the one hiding our mythic selves, right? And mummifying our mythic selves, and then, making the sarcophagus and hiding it away so well that we didn't even know it existed, right? And so a lot of my assignments are playful, right? Design your wings, or like, for you being a child, like the joy of being a child means playing in mud. Okay, I am assigning you to go and play in mud. Send me pictures. I want to see what that looks like. And so, yeah, my clients will send me the pictures. I'd be like, yes, good for you. You go. And it's really amazing what gets unleashed. And I am so honored to be able to.
It's pretty fascinating work, isn't it?
Into the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the work.
Mm-hmm.
I love the work. And well, it sounds like you're really working with people who are ready for that journey, and
yeah,
letting them be attracted to you.
And so there's an obligatory gateway, which is the legendary self, which is just, it's like 2 hours over 2 consecutive days. And the first hour is the real work. The second part is integration. And that's important because a lot of times we'll heal stuff in your records, and it gets healed on all the different levels except physically. So if the clients don't take a salt bath, they might, especially, it's usually, sometimes it's nausea or dizziness, but I don't know, 39 times out of 40, it's massive headache, because it's this limiting belief that has been blasted but not let go of. And so it's really kind of like drilling a hole in their heads. And so the integration is to ascertain whether or not there's a headache going on, and also whether or not there's been ego pushback. And if there has been ego pushback, then what I do is I just tell the story again. And the reason I think that there can be ego pushback is that during the previous day, we've been, pretty much outside of our bodies while we receive this information. So the ego's like, oh, well, that just doesn't fit the story I like to tell myself, so it's got to be BS. And so, right? And so I go in, and while they're fully embodied, I make sure they're really occupying their spine, right? While they're fully embodied, I'll tell them again. And it does, I mean, nothing stops them. It's like, whew, really rocket boosters.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, well, we're at the end of our call, and it's been so fascinating.
I've loved talking to you, Kerri.
I know. We could just do this all day. Just talk some more. So, well, fascinating. I'm sure everybody can realize like how fascinating this job is.
That's pretty awesome.
It shows up for you differently than it does for me, but you know, I work shamanically, so I'm tapping into the Akashic records, but I'm not really specifically aware of that. I'm just feeling the energy, and then I'll get flashes or, you know, things like that. But it is totally fascinating, and you never know what's going to happen next. And I think that's the main point of this call is, with all the themes that we talked about, is that you never know what's going to happen next with this path. And so that is the path of the feminine. It's a journey of the unknown. It's a journey of following, listening, being present, you know, being willing to be open and receive new experiences.
Yep.
Synchronicity.
Well, and being nimble and following, turning on a dime, right? And like, oh, my intuition says to go here. Okay, I'll go here then.
Yeah. Okay. And then see what happens.
Yeah. It's such an adventure. I mean, I think one of the lies of patriarchy is that women are weak and not, you know, don't have the strength that men have. I'm like, that is such BS. The feminine is the strong part.
Yes. Right? The feminine is the one that has the deep roots into the earth.
Mm-hmm. And the masculine is there like to exteriorize that strength. But if you don't have inner strength, you can't have outer strength. Right? And so this is why, you know, the great lie of patriarchy is that like women are bad, or the feminine is bad and men are good, or the masculine is good. It's like, okay, they're both needed, because if you get rid of one, you're screwed. Right?
Totally. We have to be mindful of balancing both the energies, and the balance is different within each person. You know, my mentor is really good at, Heather Ashamara is really good at saying, you know, we have masculine and feminine energies, but it's not a 50-50 ratio in each person. You know, there's a balance that's right for you, and you've got to find that. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm super fiery. So, you know, but you know, it's so funny that I'm a healer in this life. You know, I think that's to help me temper the fire so that I can spend more time in the unknowable as part of my job. You know, like I have to be quiet and listen in order to do my job well. It's a big setup. It's so sneaky. So I am really glad that I had this call with you today.
Thank
you. You know, what a blessing. And you already talked about your free gift, so everyone knows what they're going to get from you. It's very exciting. The link will be in the email. And I don't know. I think this is fabulous. I really look forward. I loved hearing. I want to talk to you some more about what you do and find out more.
Yeah. And
that stuff fascinates me.
You know, once you're on my website getting the free gift, you can just click the programs page and that'll tell you more. And if you are feeling called by the words mythic or legendary, you can know that is why, you know, you have a connection to the mythic plane, a deep one. I think everyone could, but not everyone who's here right now does. It's very clear that not everyone who's here right now does.
It's very clear.
Yeah, if you are called by these words,
obvious.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're called by these words, do reach out to me. Yeah. I love hearing from people. I'm not one of these people who has like a million layers of like you can't reach to me. I answer emails, right? And I love talking to people.
And I want to encourage people too. Don't be shy and don't be embarrassed by being different, because that's what this show is about. That's why we're sharing all these stories on this show. So it's okay.
Your story of not being good enough is really a story of being too much for others to handle. So yeah, the different is not less than.
No.
So
it's exciting and embrace the journey. Okay, well, I like to end the calls by giving all kisses to everybody. So I'm going to give everybody a kiss. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye.
thanks.